Alright, man, gotta put on some tunes. What? Hello, everyone, and welcome to another News Coolum video. And, I want to say another type of video, but, this is actually something I kind of want to do recurring because as I'm working both on the Ford Ranger electric projects, but also on some other things like power backup, energy storage, grid, off-grid energy storage, things like that. I'm doing a lot of different projects, and I wanted to go over, some of the tools and things that I'm doing as I'm working through these projects, right? Because as I learn something, or I learn techniques, or I test out techniques and try them, there's still not a whole lot of information about this online. I know like DIY Solar, Will Pros does a lot of good stuff. Andy with Off Grid Garage does a lot of good stuff. So there's a lot of content out there on how to and what people are doing, best practices, some of it from licensed electricians, others not so much. But because we're all sort of learning this together, like I said, I at least want to go over some of the stuff that I've learned, and then again, just to open up a dialogue, because I don't consider myself an expert at, in any way doing this. I'm more of a journeyman who's kind of trying to find my way through. So the comments are helpful to me. They're helpful to everyone in terms of feedback, things to do, things not to do. But this specific video, I wanted to talk about my tape collection. So it seems kind of appropriate in a late 1990s, early 2000 truck to talk about a tape collection, even though this one actually doesn't have a tape deck, doesn't even have a CD player. This is old school even for 2000. But I'm using a number of different tape for different aspects of the project. And, it's kind of like Ramona Quimby 2.0, right? There's nothing you can't fix with Scotch Tape. Well, we've upgraded from Scotch Tape. And so one of the main purposes that I've been using tape with is to create battery cell groups. And using some of these prismatic cells, these larger cells, you're going to use different types of tape to package them together. So with the Ford Ranger Electric in particular, I kind of went over what some of the cell configuration is going to look like. And so you can kind of look at some like the cell groups, right? When I was going over that row of cells that's going to be on its side along the outer edge of the battery shell in the main compartment, there are 21 cells there. So if you're grouping those together, it just makes sense to make cell groups of 3. But these lithium iron phosphate cells, 4 of them together in series, create essentially a 12-volt cell that's compatible with all of your different 12-volt equipment. So my primary outside of the Ford Ranger electric cell groups are going to be in 4s. In the Ranger pack, just for ease of use and navigating and things like that, they're probably going to be in cell groups of 2 or 3. Again, these prismatic cells that I'm using are heavy. They're about 11 to 11 and a half pounds. So you start putting 4 together, you're already talking easily 44, 45, 46 pounds worth of cells. So they become a lot more difficult to navigate and move around once you have a cell group that size. But I'm still packaging them this way just for, like I said, ease of use, for other purposes, and in the Ford Ranger Electric. So one of the first things that you'll see is sort of on the outside periphery. You'll see a lot of people use tape to compress and hold the cells together. And that is called Kapton Tape. Now, this Kapton Tape is, I have 1-inch rolls here because I would rather do multiple loops than do, just like one big single loop. But this is silicon-based tape, and the reason that you use it, you see it used in electronics a lot, like I have another bag here. The reason you see it used in electronics a lot is it's non-conductive. That's number one, and that's something that I think people forget about, even like the prismatic cells, the cylindrical cells. Their outer case is energized, right? In the case of the prismatic cells, it's an outer case that's positive. In the case of cylindrical cells, it typically tends to be the outer case is negative. If that's exposed aluminum, well, what you're going to end up with is a lot of cells conducting together, and even if you try to hook something into a series, you could end up with parallel connections. It could just make a big mess, right? A huge closed circuit. So this tape is used on the outside of the cells. Again, it's not conductive. That's one reason you can use it. It's not static. And then the other thing is, too, the adhesive on this can withstand much higher temperatures. So when the cells heat up, the adhesive on the tape doesn't just melt away. And then the other aspect of it is it's more resistant to stretching. And so what you'll see is, I'll wrap cells with this, not necessarily to provide compression, but to keep them in place, keep them together. Now, I've been experimenting with some of the cell groups that I've been making, and I have been using adhesive tape, double-sided. And so it will be something like this Gorilla Tape. I also have the LLPT tape, which comes a lot more highly regarded than Gorilla Tape. But I've been trying this between the cells to add some adhesion, and it just doesn't work, right? Part of it is the cells aren't necessarily standard in their fitment, right? And it's just not providing that much sticking force anyway between the cells. So I don't know that I'm going to continue it. I still have a decent amount of, like I said, this and the LLPT double-sided tape, which, I'll continue to use that, but that's going to be more to sort of secure the cell groups in place, say, in a pack or in a container. And not the only securing, obviously, but just enough to keep them from rattling around, moving around on their own. But yeah, it just sort of an additional adhesive to keep the cell group in place. But I'm not going to continue using this in between the cells because it just didn't add any sort of adhesion at all to it, and it was just sort of redundant. In addition to the Kapton tape, wasn't really holding or securing. So I'm still have a use for those double-sided tapes. I'm just not going to continue to use it. But I am going to continue to use tape between these larger prismatic cells because, again, like I said, these are conductive cases. You don't want any contact in between the two cell walls to sort of cancel out a charge or create a short. And what I've been using in between is what's called Mastic Tape. Now, this is the 2228 Scotch Mastic Tape. Now, the primary purpose in this is insulation. This is basically bus bar insulation. So it's high voltage resistant. You see it's up to a 90 C or 90 Celsius or 194 degree Fahrenheit tape. And so, this is something where it provides a lot of insulation, a lot of electrical insulation, plus it's got very decent temperature ratings on it, and so I'm putting this in between. Now, this isn't true double-sided tape, right? Only one side has any adhesive on it at all, and that's really just, it seems like, to keep the tape in place on whatever conductive surface you're attaching it to. And in this case, I'm putting it between the cells, so that at those sort of touch points, like the corners of the cells and along the edges where the cell might actually, contort and bump up against the other cell, I'm putting this mastic tape in between to create kind of a buffer for the cells, a little bit of an air gap, not that thick, right? This is what did they call this? 0.065 inch thickness. It's really not that thick, so it's just enough to create a small air gap and prevent connection between. I will probably also be using this on bus bars and other connections within the battery pack, just to provide a little bit more safety and a little bit more insulation. But also, when you use this, right, you're not using this by itself. You can use it in conjunction with other tapes, which is what I'll be using inside the battery pack. And then the next tape that I'm using is just I would say standard electrical tape, but I'll get to that in a second. I'm using things like this Scotch tape. Now, I'll bring it up here, but you'll see there are 3 different colors, right? So I have the orange for high voltage, the black for when I'm wrapping like negative terminals or things that I want to signify as negative in the battery pack. And then I have red for the positive terminals, things that I want to signify as positive. And when I say this isn't really standard electrical tape, what I'm saying about that is this is vinyl tape. And again, if you look at the temperature rating on it, these temperature ratings are actually quite quite high, right? So you're talking about 105 C, which is the same as you'll see for a lot of the heat shrink and cabling insulation, or 221 degrees Fahrenheit. So this is very high temperature, very good insulating protection. Like I said, if I'm really worried about insulation, I'll pair it up with the mastic tape. And when I say this isn't standard electrical tape, I'm looking at something like this, right? Where this is just, I mean, it is a vinyl tape. It is a vinyl electrical tape. They even call it professional grade, right? And it's flame retardant. But if you look at the back, it actually has the temperature guide here. And it's only 80 C. It's not even 200 degrees Fahrenheit. So this is a significant downgrade versus these higher temp, higher quality electrical tapes that you're going to want to be using in some sort of an electric vehicle project or any sort of high voltage project. And frankly, any sort of high current or high temperature project, even if it's a 12 volt project. If it's running high enough current, I would use this type of electrical tape. So that's it. That's kind of my tape collection, right? Like I said, I've been using it for various things within the project, creating cell groups. I'm not really going to be using this double-sided tape for the cell groups as much anymore. It just isn't working the way I want it to, versus like the mastic tape, and of course the Kapton tape is really good. So anyway, I'd love to hear what you think. What's your experience with these types of tapes, putting cell groups together, or packaging, or wrapping connections, or things like that, wrapping bus bars? Have you used mastic tape before? Have you used it in conjunction with electrical tape to do these different things? Like I said, this is as much just to be informative as it is a learning experience and a growing experience for everyone. So I look forward to hearing what people say, what their experiences are, and what they've worked with, when they're doing high voltage, like I said, connections, batteries, things like that. So if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel, and thank you for watching.